Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is Refuge from Narcissism, and this refugee video is sponsored by contribution from Rex Remedy. And here's his story. It is just a dream. Dear Ollie, I'm sending this in since recently you said you really need video requests. This is not exactly an attempt to call out a narcissist or a verifiable biographical or a verifiable biographical insight that might help to validate other viewers' experiences. It's simply a story I would like to share, a small insight into a tragedy. Sorry for using PayPal. There's no other option. Yeah, I know you're overseas. Rex is overseas, so I believe it's Germany. Sorry for using PayPal. There's no other option in this retarded country from where I am sending you the money. I hope it's sufficient, and I hope you're going to be able to stay warm this winter, Rex. I really do. I mean, that's outside of the video. I really hope that you guys are going to be able to heat your homes and stay warm and not starve to death. And I hate to say, Trump told you. Trump told your government at the UN being dependent on Russian gas and oil would lead to this, and they laughed at him. They ain't laughing now, though, are they? I read my text many times, and I hope the amount covers your invested time. After this recent long video of yours, I felt terrible for sending something in I don't want to claim to be, nor prove to be autobiographical. But then, on the other hand, that's how I deal with past trauma. To change essential parts and make them into stories which still convey basic experience or emotional baseline. And I wrote this text long before you uploaded this long, weird video that feels like an audiobook. I have no intention to drift your channel into Ollie's Narc Story Hour, but I'm a very reserved person. I like to have my distance and as much as possible. And that's how I put some distance between my memory and my current state of being, by treating heavy stuff as if it were a letter about dreams or inventions of the mind. I made some life choices and also went through experiences that put me in a place emotionally where I simply want to be left alone most of the time. That's where most of us are on this channel. Most of us are introverts. Most of us want to be left alone most of the time, don't want to go out and don't want to deal with anybody. And where mentally I want some distance between actual experiences and that which is written by me, at least for now. To which degree there is a distance, I prefer not to disclose. I'm sorry for my cryptic writing style, but right now I don't feel like sharing detailed biographical information for many, many reasons. Based on what I describe, one might assume that I might be a war veteran. So in order to prevent this impression, I make it herewith absolutely clear that this is not so. At least not in terms largely associated with this scenario in the U.S. I am not writing from the U.S. By no means do I even remotely want to cause the impression that I have taken part in any theater of war, nor do I want respect or concern for my personal experiences or my situation. I'll tell you this right off the bat, Rex. Say what you want. Don't feel like you got to justify yourself for anything. Like you're spending a lot of time trying to justify what you're about to say. And when you do that, narcs pick up on it. Toxic people pick up on it as somebody who's unsure and somebody who could be guilted very easily. Don't wear a sign that says, hey, I can pack your bags. We're going on a guilt trip. Okay. Because I'm the sucker. You don't want to do that by over explaining. I know what I know. I've seen what I've seen, but neither do I have the intention to prove anything to anybody, nor do I want any benefit, nor respect, nor concern. I know from experience that people jump to conclusions when one shares particular, maybe unusual or uncommon insight. Many people see and hear what they want to see and hear, not what actually has been displayed or said. Hence, I make this clear from the beginning of my message. All those topics I describe here, aside from my general background, required to put in the message put the message into the right context, should be treated as dreams or imaginations of a concerned mind and not real events. This is very important to me. Just for context about who I am and what my background is, I'm a man who wasn't exactly blessed with a peaceful and stable upbringing. But I worked hard and at some point got to where I wanted to be career-wise with good prospects. One might use terms such as scholarship and research, instructor, teacher. However, my endeavors were cut short rather early in my life, late 20s, due to ensuing repeated tragedies with increasing damage to my physical and mental health. I'm pretty sure that my negative experiences of my childhood increased likelihood for such tragedies for the future. Anyways, I basically lost the ability to earn a living based on my acquired skill sets roughly 10 years ago. Now, after an incredibly difficult last 15 years, after much fighting and hardship and pain at the loss of many activities that allowed me a modicum of life quality, the situation has improved slightly. I'm better than I was a year ago, but it cost me a lot. I once more had to jump into the void of existential dread, threat to life and well-being to resolve a major problem. I prefer not to remember what happened in detail, and most of the time I can manage not to be drawn back into the traumatic loop. However, unfortunately, sometimes memories can get triggered despite my greatest efforts, especially others inadvertently, which is one reason I prefer to stay alone. Listen, Rex, if you're going to try to tell yourself it was only a dream, whatever it is that you're getting onto here, trying to tell yourself it's only a dream, it's not real, and put it out of your mind, your subconscious is never going to let abuse be put out of your mind. It's always going to linger until you deal with it or until it destroys you. Facts. And you need to stop right off the bat. You need to stop being so almost apologetic for your feelings, for what you're about to say, for how you think and what you're feeling inside. That's got to stop. And despite my physical pain and impairment improving, it seems I have to accept the fact that physiologically, damage might be irreversible for the time being. All this fighting for survival, even for the right to fight itself after decades, can get pretty tiring. And I said that. The fighting wears you out. And the problem is you use up so much mental energy, and you use up so much mental strength that to get this far, at this point, you're basically a car with no gas. I mean, you could be a Porsche, you could be a Lamborghini, you could be whatever muscle car you want to be. If that thing doesn't have gas in it, it ain't going anywhere. It's just going to sit there and decay. I don't like the term post-traumatic stress syndrome or post-traumatic stress disorder, but most people know what it means generally. So unfortunately, I must apply such terms on me with this message here. And don't apologize for that. PTSD is real. Something we all stop apologizing because somebody broke you. You have to stop that. Indeed, I lost count of the number of life-threatening situations or so-called near-death experiences I was facing over the years. I mean, situations where one is unclear about the prospect of experiencing the next day or hour with a beating heart, or situations where pain and suffering and torment reach degrees where one enters another state of mind which is foreign to most people. Terms such as torture come to mind and might not be so far from actual perceived reality. I do understand that most people don't understand the real meaning of the word, and I'm glad about it. It's completely okay. I just mentioned it here to give a general picture. Should I mention this term this unclean term, torture. I mean, it is a term of being the target of it, not the party that would actually inflict it. I am very particular about not causing any harm or pain or even concern to anybody. That, however, does not mean I'm a doormat or wouldn't defend myself or others from actual real harm or vengeance. It just means I don't enjoy it, and I prefer to prevent such scenarios with all the strength I can muster. But it's eating up emotional energy on you. It's eating up emotional energy, and you're spending way too much time. You're spending way too much time explaining yourself. And my fear is that you're doing that in real life, is that if this is how you open up to people when you first meet them, the toxic ones are going to take that and run with it. This guy is unsure of himself. He has low self-esteem. He's afraid he's going to be attacked. And what's the best way to control him? Attack him. Gaslight him. You're opening yourself up for attacks by this. I am sorry I had to write so much, but I want to do everything I can do so the actual message can be seen exactly within the context it is meant to be embedded within without compromising my healthy distance I hold in very high regard. I don't want to be accused of stolen valor or stuff like that, even if it's an anonymous message. I care too much about this type of stuff, even if it's only so-called dreams or imagination, the mind resulting from traumatic experiences I claim to describe here. I deeply, deeply care about those classical values of loyalty, courage, honor, honesty, politeness, discipline, and so on, even mercy at times, but even to comical degrees. For without those, I would definitely be dead by now. Those values and living those isn't a luxury to me. Those are a necessity of life to me. To a certain extent, I had no choice about that anyway, since certain associated occupations are running in the family for generations. And at a certain point, there is just this reality of biological memory. I hope this is sufficient to read between the lines. I just need to be cryptical. It makes me feel safe, and in case of being misunderstood, it makes me feel safe, and in case of being understood, I even respect it at times. Of course, it's nice to feel respected. We all have our weaknesses. So do I. So now to my actual dream or imagination. In this dream, I'm a soldier, and I'm accompanied by a friend and comrade, and somehow due to confusion and disarray caused by an attack of the enemy, we get separated from the main troops and try to catch up with them while they are retreating to regroup and reorganize and make an assessment of the situation and possible losses. So we try to be very fast, since becoming isolated behind enemy lines could mean certain death. Beyond a certain level of escalation, people just start not to mess around anymore. Ugly situations can make people do ugly things. On the other hand, leaving cover in order to catch up with retreating forces increases the risk of being discovered and being shot at from unknown directions. And you understand this dream has meaning here. It's not stolen valor. See, I think you have the issue, like if you have a problem, you're trying to figure out what's the worst thing somebody's going to say to gaslight me with about it. So the both of us agree to take cover for a short time and then try to cross as much distance as silently as possible. After all, it is late evening and becoming dark, so being identified is less likely than in broad daylight. At one of those silent runs out of cover, there is suddenly a huge blast, probably because we had been noticed by the enemy. They usually wouldn't announce it to you before the fact, of course. So the blast hits unprepared. First, I think that I must certainly be dead. After a minute, I realized that despite being close to the blast, I only have a few scratches. but I'm in shock on the floor and can barely walk since my knees are shaking so hard. So I try to get up, or rather crawl slowly in complete disorientation from the blast. And of course, after a minute or so, I realize that I actually wasn't alone and that my friend Conrad must have also been hit by the blast. So in the smoke, more or less crawling on the ground, I try to find him and see whether he is still alive or dead, since I don't want to leave him alone, potentially injured or disoriented. For some reason, I'm not being fired at, probably because the enemy assumes we must be dead after such a blast. Why waste ammunition? So after a while, I find him laying in smoke and rubble and see that he has some severe injuries at his thigh and lower arm with blood-soaked clothes at all those spots. He is breathing, but not in very good shape. I talk to him and he replies. So first, I'm really happy that he's alive, but after a couple minutes, I realize that his words make no real sense. He's talking like a small child. He says repeatedly, "Mother, my arm hurts so much." I tell him, "Hey, your mother isn't here. You're not at home." He starts crying and shouting, and I tell him, "Please be still or they will find us." But my words don't even enter his brain. Trying to pull him out of his broken mental state feels pointless to me. The shock must have triggered some earlier memories and locked him into this past experience. He is incapable of processing reality due to his shock. He can listen and see and talk, but he interprets the situation wrongly. I want to reach him in his imaginations, so I give in and say, "Yes, I know you are hurt. I will tell your father and bring you to him, but you must be silent now, or he will be very angry with you. I will tell your father that you didn't behave properly and cause me trouble if you continue making noise." And that sounds like something an abusive parent says to their child. See, this dream is really, is a metaphor. The war scene is really a metaphor, I think, for your upbringing, for your family. And you talked how you're an introvert, you like to stay left alone. And I think this might be your dream telling you, hey, if you let people in, they're going to give up your position. They're going to give up your position and get you hurt and get you killed. And you saying you're not a military guy. You've never been in the military. So so it seems like you're kind of retrofitting the scenario of an abusive parent to fit a wartime situation in your dream. So this finally calms him down. I feel absolutely terrible for doing this to him. It feels like a deep betrayal. But I want us to survive. The smoke, blast, and fires is fading away, though, which could give away our position. On the other hand, it is onsetting night, and it will be more difficult in the darkness to be identified. Since I really can't discuss the situation with my friend as the blast transported him mentally into another dimension, I decide to seek more substantial cover for the night. After half an hour of pulling him and shoving and crawling and encouraging him like a small child, I reach a safer spot in a depression in a small but dense forest out of line of sight. So finally I have time to take a closer look at his injuries at his thigh and lower arm. At this point, my friend is silently mumbling and rambling confused stuff off which I don't understand half of it anyways. Fortunately, when I talk authoritatively to him, I can influence him to calm him down to a certain degree. But for some reason, he doesn't even want me to touch his arm and cut off the sleeve and the part of the trousers to clean the wounds and see how bad it is. I tell him I talked to your parents and they told me that you have to allow me to cut off the fabric. It convinces him, but this also makes me feel even worse. That a person who completely lost the plot is now trapped with me in some real danger in the wilderness, and that I have to lie to him to take advantage of his impaired reasoning to make him comply with my efforts to help him. And I think what's happening here, even though you have a friend in the dream, I think your friend is actually the abused you from your childhood. And I think these things you're telling him are things your parents used to tell you in order for you to do what they wanted you to do. I try to trigger other more recent memories to make him snap out of his imagination, but all in futility. It makes me so sad to see my friend infantilized like that. I would like to get him help, but my options are very limited. And I think this is a wartime where you're trying to help yourself. It's almost, it's almost Fight Club, where you realize that, I can't remember, what's his name? Edward Norton and Tyler Durden are the same person. See, I think in your wartime scenario, you are Tyler Durden. You are Tyler Durden. Where both of these people, you and your friend, are you. One's just the young you who dealt with the abuse. After taking a look at his wounds, it doesn't really look good either. Some thin metal shell pieces must have caused deep cuts in his arm and leg, slash basically. Those are pretty clean cuts, fortunately, with minimal bruising. But his clothes are already soaked with blood and his wounds are wet from blood. When I touch the vicinity of the cut, suddenly blood starts dripping. I have neither the tools nor the experience to treat those wounds to reduce the bleeding more professionally. So the only option left is to put those cuts under much pressure with remaining cloth and dressing. But of course, putting pressure on those deep cuts also causes him much pain. By talking to him like a small child again, I can somehow keep him calm from putting the improvised compression bandages over his wounds and tightening them very slowly and cautiously to prevent him from screaming in agony. I tell him that he is losing blood and that he must have lost blood already, but he doesn't process this information. Instead, he starts with short, simple statements about his situation. Stuff like, I'm in pain. I want to go home. I am so cold. Why am I so cold? Where is my mother? A constant stream of such statements repeated on and on, a constant loop. Fortunately, though, not very loud, more or less mumblings, but it starts getting in my head. The problem is just that he starts to attempt to get up and move around. With statements such as, I have to go home, but by moving his legs and arm, he destabilizes the gaping cuts, which are only held together with the pressure of cloth and dressings. And also, with such attempted activities, the heart starts pumping more blood, causing possibly more blood loss as compared to remaining still. So of course I can already see how the cloth gets soaked with fresh drips of blood again. And at this point I'm afraid that my friend could bleed to death overnight if he doesn't stop moving his legs and arms and attempts to start walking. The cuts and wounds need to be kept still for the wounds to settle and for the blood forming clots that help to reduce blood loss. I care about the man. He lost the plot due to shock. I don't fault him. I don't want to lose him. It just starts saddening me deeply. But I have to push it away and stay in the moment and find solutions. At this point, even I start talking to myself. You've been talking to yourself the whole time here, Rex. You're both people in this scenario. They're both you, the older you trying to save the younger you. Excuse me. I try to reason with him to remain still, but it doesn't help. Even telling him that his father would want him to be still doesn't seem to work anymore. His drive to get up and walk home is too strong. He wants to walk home, but walking home will kill you. Now, I don't know what the deal is with your family. I'm assuming I'm on the right track. I don't know if this is a no contact situation with your family, but this is your subconscious mind telling you going home will kill you. Breaking no contact will kill you. If you're actually no contact, that is. After a while, I decide there is only one way to help him survive until we find help. I can only reduce his blood loss if he stops moving, and since he doesn't want to do that voluntarily, I decide to tie him up in a way he can't move much, and thus not inadvertently reopen the wounds and increasing his heart rate, causing more blood loss. So kind of like, if you go back, I'm going to restrain you from going back and killing yourself. Lines up with you being an introvert and not wanting to be around people and keeping a distance from them. At least over the night, my own heart starts bleeding at this point. Okay, at least over the night. My own heart starts bleeding at this point. I hate having to do this to him, but I want to save his life for his parents. I have to do everything I could do. I owe this to him. So I get over my own concerns to put a good friend into bindings, especially close to enemy lines, which means in an emergency he couldn't run away. On the other hand, if he doesn't survive the night, he won't move in any case. So it's decided. While he lays on the floor moving his arms, mumbling crazy stuff, I make preparations. I still got some lengthy rope for emergencies and plan to surprise him with my attempt to overrun his possible resistance and also reduce the risk of further blood loss of his. The faster it's done, the lower the health risk. So I must be swift and forceful to get him into proper bindings and not cause him additional injuries with my attempt. I reason only shortly for fear that I might emotionally collapse and that my hesitation would worsen the outcome. So I switch to instinct mode and do what I believe has to be done and which comes naturally after initialization. I don't announce it. I only talk casually and calmly as I did the last hour or two by that time to keep him more relaxed and in stable mental state. Then I grab him at the risk of the non-injured arm and pull it up and twist it and lock it with his shoulder joint, force him to roll over on his chest and push him on the floor by pressing down his straightened arm in this joint lock and start tying him up. I spare you the details also because I do not want to give details about such stuff for fear people might stupidly misuse it. Needless to mention that this is not exactly convenient. And inevitably, this sudden rough treatment confuses him horribly and he feels threatened. But at this point, he has no chance to resist substantially anymore. It made me so sad and ashamed about myself that I became nauseous. By putting my parts of my body weight on him, I can immobilize him to the degree where I can wrap those bindings around his legs and arms without causing much additional pain or injury. But he is desperate at this point. It crushes him emotionally, and I didn't expect such a strong reaction since I was more focused on coldly assessing the situation to help him survive. Maybe I was suppressing the fear of causing him emotional trauma by tying him up in his confused state. While I attempted to immobilize him, I tell him I won't hurt you, I will help you, please be still, and so on. To show him that I understand his fears and validate him, also to show him that his condition and well-being is really important to me. Again, this is your older self trying to save your younger self. This is Tyler Durden trying to save Edward Norton. In in a constant loop, and after a while I have the feeling that it starts having an effect, and he starts breathing more slowly. His physical resistance weakens also, but it doesn't make me feel any better. Rather, it makes me feel worse that I have broken my friend emotionally now, and also his will, especially for breaking his will. It's among the worst things a man can do to another man or woman. I made him helpless and compromised his dignity. I betrayed his trust. It started wearing on me. How could I ever forget? Well, it wasn't you somebody broke your will. These are your feelings. Suddenly, I get terrified that he calms down because I caused him an injury or made his wounds actually worse. So I check his dressings, but it looks okay. Not good, but okay. I stand up and look down at him on the floor to catch a breath, and I feel very sad at the sight. And I feel so sorry to have to hurt my friend for having put him in this situation, to have him tied up in a way that doesn't allow him to move at all. And this is you being an introvert. You feel like you've tied yourself up from the world, and you feel guilty about it. I cherish freedom very much, and I'm sure so does he. So I start apologizing to him and telling him to please forgive me, and that I want to save his life, and preventing him from inadvertently reopening his wounds and bleeding to death overnight in his confusion. But it really doesn't register. So I ask him in short sentences if he's angry at me. But to my surprise, while wiggling around on the floor in his bindings, he says that he isn't angry, but that he's afraid and confused and so very cold. He then asks me why I'm angry at him, that I would treat him that roughly. And I tell him that I am not angry, I'm only concerned. I don't tell him that I'm afraid that he may die soon due to blood loss to not make him even more terrified. I tell him that I know that it is difficult for him right now, but that I am sure that it is going to be all right tomorrow, and that he should tell me if some of his bindings cause him pain so I can make it more bearable. For a while, he seemed approachable and lucid, maybe a short moment of quiet and clarity for him, where I can show him that I care about him and make him understand, and where maybe he could forgive me for what I did to him. I want to give him that, some solace and hope, and maybe respect and concern also. He deserves it. At this point, I can't bear it anymore and turn my head and walk into another end of the ditch and sink on my knees and quietly bang my head against a piece of thick root. And I start talking to myself quietly that I must pull myself together, that it is only temporary and the next day it'll be all right. I calm down after a couple minutes and walk back to my friend lying on the floor in his bindings. He's not even angry at me now. I realize the poor guy is lying on his chest and face in the dirt and not even really lucid. So I kneel down and help him carefully roll over to his non-injured side so he doesn't have to look at the dirt with his face in it. He tells me very calmly that he is very, very cold and he wonders why he really can't move much. So I take off my jacket and collect whatever pieces of fabric and cloth I can find and put it over him to warm him up a little. I try to talk to him to keep his mind active, and sometimes he becomes lucid, then tunes out again and becomes a childlike in his mental state, where he would try to move uncontrollably and not even understand that he's tied up. I tied him up in a way so he can't really see the ropes much, because that's also safer. But despite him calming down generally, I just can't untie him for fear he might move uncontrollably again, or try to walk and thus reopen his wounds while having these childlike active episodes. And this is you almost afraid to come out of your shell. This is you afraid to approach people. And you feel like this version of you, okay, it has to control that old version of you, because you think that old version of you is really going to get you killed. And you're saying he's going to get himself killed, but I think this is you. It's just two versions of yourself. My hope is also that the bindings reduce blood flow into the extremities and thus reduce the risk of additional blood loss. And despite the inconvenience, it indeed looks as if the bleeding slowly subsides. So I want to have to keep him tied up despite much pain caused by his injuries, which puts a heavy burden on my heart. I don't want to cause anybody inconvenience or put them into undignified situations. I do if I have to save lives or protect people and friends, but it burdens me heavily also. With his hands tied behind his back, he can only somewhat lie comfortably on the side, not on the back and also not with the chest. Lying on the back causes him pain. On the chest causes problems with breathing and is generally an undignified and dangerous position one doesn't want to see a friend in. At this point, after calming him down a bit and my covering him with improvised blankets, I suddenly get so very tired. I get afraid that I would just fall asleep and can't watch out for my injured, helpless, and at times confused friend anymore. So I take a remaining piece of rope and tie around the ropes around his shoulder, chest, and wrist, and take a length maybe 2 or 3 feet and tie the other end around my wrist. So in case my friend changes his posture or moves a lot, or he would free himself, that the pulling at my wrist would wake me up so I could take care of him or protect him or help him or notice if he inadvertently freed himself. Then I sit down and lean at the wall of the ditch right next to him. Maybe my proximity can keep him warm or at least comfort him psychologically. I don't want him to lie alone, wounded in a ditch, all tied up, no way to wake me up or alert me physically, especially since I'm so tired and expect a very deep sleep. I try to stay awake and talk to my friend, but it is hard to reach him mentally, which makes me even more tired. I tell him that I will watch out for him and that he is not alone and that in any case, I won't leave him alone. It calms him down a bit, but generally he is mostly not really lucid. He is stuck in reliving childhood memories mixed with his current condition and trauma and the mismatch of his current situation and imagined situation confuses him. This is you. This is about your childhood memory. Again, this is about your childhood memories. You're talking to Tyler Durden, and you are Tyler Durden. And I don't want to confuse him even more, so I just let him talk and once in a while throw in a comforting sentence to keep him mentally more stable and relaxed and prevent him from feeling too confused and terrified. Also because I assume that he may be in much pain with his mumblings in the background. After hours, I finally fall asleep despite all my efforts. It must be a couple hours later that I wake up. There was already a faint sunlight on the horizon, so I had to try to get set very quickly to assess the situation, and especially if we are still alone or under threat. Fortunately, it's very quiet. Just a slight breeze and some birds singing. I kneeled down at my friend who fell asleep as well at some point to check on him and his wounds and compression bandages, and it looks as if the bleeding stopped overnight. The blood on the cloth doesn't look fresh and wet. I don't want to wake him up as he looks so peaceful while sleeping under such a bad night. So, to be sure of his well-being, I hold my hand below his nose, but I can't feel any breathing. In shock, I touch him on his forehead, but he's cold. His entire body is cold. He died while I was asleep. I couldn't prevent it. I missed him dying. I hope he doesn't die feeling lonely. I always miss them when they are dying, so they never can really say goodbye proper. He was a good man, just a little confused, and there was no real fault in getting confused in difficult situations. It can happen. I won't forget him, and who knows, maybe I am as confused. I just didn't notice it yet. Goodbye, my friend, and this time goodbye proper. I am sorry. This is your fear of dying alone. This is your fear that you locked yourself away and dying alone. And Tyler Durden's trying to stop you, which is another version of you, from going back. Final comments. This is the short version. There are many aspects and events I can't share for brevity's sake, and I don't even have any intention to share more right now. After all, it's just a bad dream of mine, nightmare, if you will. Why elaborate too much on things that aren't real? Because they are real. It's in a dream, but your dream's trying to tell you something. You're trying to tell yourself something. However, in any case, a mental state is definitely and always real. Emotion and associated memory opens paths forcefully to very unfiltered states of being. Some nightmares just stay with you even after you woke up. It's such a long time ago that I felt a natural connection with somebody. Sometimes I don't know if it's dream or reality. In any case, if you can't wake up from a nightmare, the next best thing if you can't wake up from a nightmare, it is the next best things in terms of reality. I don't know why in particular. I just had to tell you this, and I wanted to share this. Not that now would be the right time. I wish you all the best and keep up your great work. Rex Remedy. You're trying to tell yourself something here. Okay, you have a fear of dying alone. You're fearful that you've cut too many people out. And you're looking for human connection somewhere. You know, this is your subconscious, much like Fight Club, telling you where you're trying to do for yourself. One version of you is fighting a younger version of you. And that's what you got to come to realize, that what is this dream really about? Because it's not about war. Don't worry about anybody stolen value. It's not about war. Okay? It's about abuse. It's about your past. It's about dying alone. It's about being alone. It's about the two versions of you at war with each other. One trying to help, one doesn't understand, one wants to go back, one wants to stay away. You have your own Tyler Durden in your head. Now, whether he's right or you're right, that's something you two got to work out. Without getting into the specifics of the abuse, you're telling me about a dream, but this dream points to abuse. Points to abuse, points to hiding from abuse and the need to move past it. Don't run from it, okay? Deal with it. Because if you don't deal with it, okay, you're either going to deal with it or it's going to kill you. One or the other. So, I hope that helps. Thank you so much for your contribution, Rex, and your story. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, something you'd like me to expose, you'd like to set up a Skype, phone call, have a private video made, you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with either the Cash App, Zelle, or PayPal links, and my email address in the description box below. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been Refuge from Narcissism. Take care, everybody.